The horse beneath her moved like liquid fire across the Colorado plains, and Catherine Keller knew that every man watching from the dusty street of Anima's Forks would remember this moment for the rest of their lives. Her chestnut mare, Lightning, ate up the ground with powerful strides that sent clouds of red earth spinning into the brilliant June sky of 1882. And Catherine leaned low over the animal's neck, feeling the rhythm of hoofbeats like a second heartbeat in her chest. She crossed the makeshift finish line a full 3 lengths ahead of Tom Harrison's black stallion, and the roar that went up from the crowd told her everything she needed to know about her victory. Catherine pulled Lightning to a graceful stop and wheeled the mare around, her dark blonde hair escaping from its pins to fly wild around her shoulders. The mountain air was thin and crisp at this altitude, even in summer, and her breath came fast from the exhilaration of the race. She caught sight of Tom Harrison's face, red with humiliation and anger, and something cold settled in her stomach despite the warmth of triumph. Tom was not a man who took losing well, especially not to a woman. "That is $20 you owe me, Tom," Catherine called out, keeping her voice steady and clear. She had learned long ago that showing fear in front of these men would only make things worse. Lightning danced beneath her, still full of energy despite the hard run, and Catherine kept her seat with the easy confidence of someone who had been born to the saddle. Tom Harrison spat into the dust and reached for his pocket with clear reluctance. The miners and ranchers who had gathered to watch the race pressed closer, their faces eager for any hint of drama. Catherine knew that half of them had bet on her despite their doubts, drawn by the increasingly favorable odds she had been building over the past 6 months. The other half had lost their money backing Tom, certain that no woman could truly outrace a man on horseback, no matter what they had heard. "You got lucky today," Tom said as he slapped the coins into Catherine's outstretched hand. His eyes were hard and mean, and Catherine recognized the look of a man nursing a grudge. "That mare of yours must have had an easy week while my stallion has been working." "Lightning works every day on my father's ranch," Catherine replied coolly, pocketing the money. "Maybe you should spend less time making excuses and more time learning how to ride properly." The crowd laughed at that, and Tom's face went from red to purple. He took a step toward Catherine, but Lightning's ears went back and the mare bared her teeth in warning. Tom stopped, clearly unwilling to tangle with 1,200 pounds of protective horseflesh, and Catherine used the moment to turn Lightning away and start back toward the center of town. Anima's Forks sat high in the San Juan Mountains, a mining town that clung to existence through sheer stubbornness and the promise of silver in the surrounding peaks. The buildings were a mix of rough timber and newer painted structures, testament to the boom that had brought hundreds of fortune seekers flooding into these mountains over the past decade. Catherine had been born here, back when Anima's Forks was nothing but a collection of tents, and her father had been one of the first ranchers to see the opportunity in feeding all these hungry miners. She dismounted in front of the general store, looping Lightning's reins around the hitching post with practiced ease. The mare immediately dropped her head to rest, her sides still heaving slightly from the exertion of the race. Catherine ran a hand down the horse's sleek neck, feeling the dampness of sweat beneath her palm. "That was some riding, Miss Keller." Catherine turned to find a stranger leaning against the post beside Lightning. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. His clothes marked him as a cowboy rather than a miner, good quality denim and leather worn soft with use, and he wore a gun belt with the casual comfort of someone who knew how to use it. Something about the way he looked at her made Catherine's pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with the race. "Thank you," she said, studying him with equal frankness. "I do not believe we have met." "Carter Reynolds," he said, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture that seemed genuinely respectful rather than mocking. "I just rode in from Wyoming, looking for work, and I heard your father might be hiring hands for the summer." Catherine felt a small smile tug at the corner of her mouth. "You heard correctly. Henry Keller is always looking for good men who know cattle, but I should warn you, my father has high standards." "So do I," Carter said, and there was something in his voice that made the words feel like more than just talk of ranch work. "I saw you race just now. That mare of yours is something special, but the rider makes all the difference. You have real skill." It was not the first compliment Catherine had received on her riding, but coming from this stranger with his quiet confidence and direct gaze, it felt different. She found herself wanting to keep him talking, to learn more about this cowboy who had appeared in Anima's Forks like something out of a dime novel. "Lightning and I have been together since she was a filly," Catherine said, glancing at the mare with affection. "I trained her myself, and she knows my thoughts before I think them sometimes." "That is the kind of partnership that wins races," Carter agreed. He pushed off from the post and came to stand beside Lightning, running an assessing eye over the horse with clear appreciation. "Good bone structure, strong hindquarters, and that chest tells me she has the lungs for this altitude. You chose well when you picked her." "Actually, no one else wanted her," Catherine admitted. "She was too spirited, they said, too wild to ever be properly broken. But I saw something different when I looked at her." Carter's gray eyes met hers over Lightning's back, and Catherine felt something shift in the air between them. "Sometimes the wild ones are worth the trouble," he said softly. Before Catherine could respond, a commotion from down the street drew their attention. Tom Harrison had emerged from the saloon with 3 of his friends, and they were making their way toward Catherine, with the deliberate, aggressive walk of men who had been drinking and working themselves up to something stupid. Carter straightened immediately, his hand falling to rest near his gun in a gesture that looked casual but was anything but. "Friend of yours?" he asked. "Hardly," Catherine said, tension creeping into her shoulders. "That is Tom Harrison. He does not like losing, especially to a woman." "Then he should stop racing against women who can beat him," Carter observed, but he had shifted slightly to place himself between Catherine and the approaching men. Tom stopped a few feet away, swaying slightly. The whiskey smell rolled off him in waves, and his eyes were bloodshot and mean. "I have been thinking about that race," he announced loudly, drawing the attention of everyone on the street. "And I have decided that it was not fair. You must have done something to my horse before the race started. Maybe drugged him or spooked him somehow." Catherine felt anger flare hot in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "That is a serious accusation, Tom, and completely false. You lost because Lightning is faster than your stallion. Accept it with grace and move on." "I do not have to accept anything," Tom snarled. "And I want my money back, or we are going to have a problem." "The lady won that race fair and square," Carter said, his voice calm but carrying a note of steel that made everyone within earshot stop and listen. "I watched the whole thing. There was no cheating involved, just superior riding and a better horse. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me." Tom's eyes narrowed as he focused on Carter for the first time. "Who the hell are you?" "Nobody important," Carter said easily. "Just somebody passing through who does not like seeing a woman harassed by a sore loser and his drunk friends." For a long moment, the street was silent except for the wind whistling down from the high peaks. Catherine could feel the tension singing in the air like a plucked wire, and she knew that things could turn violent in a heartbeat. Tom Harrison was mean enough sober, and whiskey made him downright dangerous. But then Sheriff Dalton stepped out of his office across the street, his hand resting on his own gun, and the spell broke. Tom glanced at the lawman, then back at Carter, clearly calculating his chances. Whatever he saw in Carter's steady gaze must have convinced him to back down, because he spat into the dust again and jerked his head at his friends. "This is not over," Tom said, pointing a finger at Catherine. "You think you are so special because you can ride a horse. We will see how special you are when your father's ranch goes under. Everyone knows Henry Keller is drowning in debt." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. It was true that the ranch had been struggling lately, caught between rising costs and falling beef prices, but she had not realized that their troubles were common knowledge in town. The shame of having their private difficulties aired in public made her want to sink into the ground. Tom saw her reaction and grinned nastily. "That is right. Maybe you should be racing for higher stakes if you want to save that ranch of yours. Oh, wait, you are just a woman. Nobody would take you seriously in a real race with real money on the line." He turned and swaggered away with his friends, leaving Catherine standing in the street with her hands clenched into fists and her face burning. She could feel the eyes of the townspeople on her, full of pity and speculation, and it made her want to scream. "Is it true?" Carter asked quietly. About the ranch, Catherine wanted to tell him it was none of his business, that he was a stranger and she owed him no explanations. But something about his direct question, asked without judgment or pity, made her answer honestly. "Yes, we have had a hard few years. My father borrowed money to expand the herd, thinking the beef prices would hold steady, but then the market crashed. We have been trying to make the payments, but it has been difficult." Carter was silent for a moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. "How much are you short?" "I do not see how that is relevant," Catherine said stiffly. "Just curious," Carter replied. He glanced after the retreating figure of Tom Harrison, then back at Catherine. "You really are the fastest rider around here." "I have never been beaten," Catherine said, lifting her chin. "Not by Tom Harrison, not by anyone else who has challenged me. Lightning is the best horse in these mountains, and I know how to bring out everything she has to give." "Good," Carter said. Something dangerous and exciting flickered in his eyes. "Because I might have an idea about how you could win enough money to save your ranch. But it would require you to trust me, and we just met, so I would understand if you told me to mind my own business." Catherine stared at him, her heart beginning to pound. There was something about this stranger, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere and stepped between her and trouble without being asked, that made her want to take risks she would normally never consider. "I am listening," she said. Carter glanced around the street, noting the watching eyes and curious faces. "Not here. Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Catherine hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Come with me. We can talk at the ranch." She swung back up into Lightning's saddle and waited while Carter walked to where his own horse was tied. A sturdy buckskin gelding that looked like it had the stamina to cross continents. He mounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. And together, they rode out of Anima's Forks toward the Keller ranch, leaving a street full of gossip and speculation in their wake. The ride to the ranch took them through some of the most beautiful country in Colorado. The trail followed the Animas River as it tumbled down from the high peaks, the water running clear and cold with snowmelt. Wildflowers dotted the meadows in brilliant splashes of color, blue columbine and red paintbrush nodding in the mountain breeze. Catherine had grown up in this landscape, and she loved it with a fierce possessiveness that went bone deep. "This is beautiful country," Carter said as they rode side by side along the river trail. "I have been all over the West, but there is something special about these mountains." "Where are you from originally?" Catherine asked, curious despite herself about this stranger's history. "Texas," Carter said. "Grew up on a ranch outside of San Antonio, but I left home when I was 18 and have been drifting ever since. Worked cattle drives up through Kansas and Nebraska, spent some time in Montana and Wyoming. I keep meaning to settle down somewhere, but the road keeps calling me on." "What made you come to Colorado?" Catherine asked. Carter was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the mountains rising all around them. "I heard there was good ranch country in these valleys, despite the altitude. And I heard about Animas Forks, a mining town that still had opportunities for men willing to work hard. I thought maybe it was time to stop drifting and start building something that lasted." There was something wistful in his voice that made Catherine look at him more closely. She guessed he was somewhere in his mid-20s, old enough to have seen and done plenty, but young enough to still be figuring out who he wanted to be. "And ranch work would give you that, maybe," Carter said, "if I can find the right place, the right people to work with." His eyes met hers briefly, and Catherine felt that same spark of connection she had experienced back in town. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Catherine found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did around men. Most of the cowboys and miners she knew either treated her like a fragile flower who needed protecting or like a challenge to be conquered and put in her place. Carter did neither. He rode beside her like an equal, comfortable with the silence and the spectacular scenery. The Keller ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. It was not the biggest spread in the valley, but it had good water and decent grazing, and Henry Keller had built it from nothing into something worth being proud of. The house was solid timber construction with a wide porch that looked out over the pastures where cattle grazed peacefully in the afternoon sun. The barn and outbuildings were well maintained, and there were good fences marking the property boundaries. But Catherine could see the signs of their struggles if she looked closely. The herd was smaller than it should be, sold off to make loan payments. There were repairs that needed doing, fence sections that sagged and barn boards that needed replacing. The ranch looked tired, worn down by the constant fight to stay afloat. Henry Keller emerged from the barn as they rode into the yard. He was a big man in his late 40s, with shoulders broadened by decades of hard work and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, the same deep blue as Catherine's, lit up when he saw his daughter, then turned assessing as they fixed on the stranger riding beside her. "Father, this is Carter Reynolds," Catherine said as she dismounted. "He is looking for ranch work. Carter, this is my father, Henry Keller." The two men shook hands, and Catherine watched her father sizing up the newcomer with the practiced eye of someone who had hired and fired dozens of cowboys over the years. Whatever he saw must have met with approval, because some of the tension left his shoulders. "You have experience with cattle?" Henry asked. "Yes, sir," Carter replied. "Been working ranches and cattle drives since I was old enough to sit a horse. I know the work and I am not afraid of hard labor." "We do not pay much," Henry warned. "Times have been tough lately and I cannot offer what some of the bigger spreads might give you." "I am not looking to get rich," Carter said. "Just want honest work and a chance to prove myself." Henry nodded slowly. "All right then. You can start tomorrow if you want. We have a bunkhouse for the hands and meals are provided. Catherine, show him where he will be staying." Catherine led Carter to the bunkhouse, a long, low building that currently looked far too empty. "We used to have 8 hands working here," she explained as she pushed open the door. "Now it is just you and 2 others. My father had to let most of them go when money got tight." The bunkhouse was clean but sparse, with rows of narrow beds and a pot-bellied stove for heat. Carter set his saddlebags on one of the bunks and turned to face Catherine. "All right. Now we can talk about my idea." Catherine crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. "I am listening." "That man today, Tom Harrison, he said something that got me thinking," Carter began. "He said nobody would take you seriously in a real race with real money on the line." "But what if they would? What if we could set up a race that was big enough to draw serious betting, and you could win enough to pay off your father's debts?" Catherine frowned. "That is a nice thought, but the kinds of races you are talking about do not happen around here. The biggest purse I have ever raced for was $50, and that was considered huge. To pay off what my father owes, I would need hundreds of dollars, maybe even 1,000. "Exactly," Carter said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "So we make our own race. We go to the mining camps and the ranches. We spread the word that there is going to be a match race in Animas Forks between the fastest horse in the San Juan Mountains and any challenger willing to put up the money. We get people invested, get them talking and making bets. And then you win and we collect." Catherine stared at him. "That is insane. Nobody is going to bet serious money on a race involving a woman rider. You heard Tom. They do not take me seriously." "They do not take you seriously because the stakes have been small," Carter argued. "But make it big enough, make it matter enough, and they will pay attention. Especially if we play it smart. We do not advertise that you are the rider at first. We just say that Lightning is the fastest horse in the mountains, and any man who thinks he has a faster animal should come prove it. We get them interested, get the betting pool built up, and then we reveal that you are the rider. By then, the money will already be committed." "That is basically a con," Catherine said flatly. "It is using people's assumptions against them," Carter corrected. "Is it your fault that everyone assumes a horse's owner cannot also be its rider if that owner happens to be a woman? You are not lying about Lightning's abilities. You are the best rider I have seen, and that mare is exceptional. All we are doing is creating an opportunity for you to prove it on a scale that actually matters." Catherine wanted to dismiss the idea as ridiculous, but she found herself turning it over in her mind. The loan payment was due in 3 months, and her father had already sold off everything he could spare. If they missed this payment, the bank would foreclose, and they would lose everything Henry Keller had spent his life building. Was it really so crazy to think that Catherine's riding skills, the one thing she was truly exceptional at, could be the solution? "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly. "You do not know us. This is not your problem." Carter was quiet for a long moment. "I watched you race today," he said finally, "and I saw something special. Not just the riding, though that was impressive enough, but the way you handled yourself with Tom Harrison and his friends, the way you refused to back down or apologize for being better than them. That takes real courage." And then I thought about what it must be like, being that good at something and having nobody take you seriously because of an accident of birth. It made me angry. So maybe I am doing this partly because I want to see you prove them all wrong. Is that a good enough reason? Catherine looked into his gray eyes and saw nothing but sincerity there. It should have seemed strange, this instant connection with a man she had just met. But sometimes, her mother had told her before she died, you meet someone and you just know. You know that this person is going to matter, that they are going to change your life in ways big and small. "All right," Catherine said, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Let us do it. Let us set up this race and see if we can save my father's ranch." Carter's face split into a grin that transformed his whole appearance, making him look younger and lighter. "That is what I wanted to hear. Now, here is what I am thinking for the details." They talked for over an hour, planning out every aspect of the scheme. Carter would ride to the surrounding mining camps and ranches, spreading word of the upcoming race and talking up Lightning's abilities. He would arrange for neutral judges, Set a date far enough out to build excitement but close enough that the momentum would not die, and work out the betting structure. Catherine would focus on keeping Lightning in peak condition and scouting out the best possible course for the race. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Carter walked with Catherine back to the main house. Henry Keller was on the porch, smoking his pipe and watching the last light fade from the peaks. "Father, there is something I need to tell you," Catherine said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. She explained the plan, watching her father's face cycle through surprise, concern, and finally a kind of desperate hope. When she finished, Henry was silent for a long time, puffing on his pipe and staring out at his land. "It is risky," he said finally. "If something goes wrong, if you lose or get hurt, we will be worse off than before. If we do nothing, we lose everything anyway," Catherine pointed out. "At least this way we have a chance." Henry turned to look at Carter, his eyes searching. "And you think this can work? You think people will really bet enough money to make a difference?" "I do," Carter said firmly. "I have seen a lot of the West, sir, and one thing I know for certain is that people love a spectacle. They love the chance to see something they have never seen before. A woman outracing the best riders in the territory. That is a story they will want to be part of. And some of them will bet against Catherine because they cannot imagine a woman winning, but others will bet on her precisely because she has never been beaten. Either way, we will have the stakes we need." Henry sighed, suddenly looking older and more tired than Catherine had ever seen him. "I do not like the idea of putting this much pressure on my daughter, but I do not see another option. Catherine, are you sure about this?" "I am sure," Catherine said, reaching out to squeeze her father's hand. "Lightning and I can do this. I know we can." Over the next few weeks, Carter proved to be as good as his word. He rode out almost every day, visiting the mining camps scattered throughout the San Juan Mountains and spreading word of the upcoming race. Catherine watched him go each morning with a mixture of admiration and something she was not quite ready to name. When he returned in the evenings, often exhausted and covered in trail dust, they would sit together after dinner, and he would tell her about the interest he was building. "The miners at Silver Creek are excited," he reported one night as they sat on the porch in the cool mountain air. "There is a guy there with a paint horse that he swears is faster than anything on 4 legs. He is already talking about the race with anyone who will listen. And I stopped by the Johnson ranch on the way back. Old man Johnson says his son has been breeding racing stock and has a 3-year-old that has never been beaten. They are definitely interested." Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. It was one thing to race for small stakes against the local cowboys. It was another thing entirely to set up a formal competition with real money on the line. "How much are people willing to bet?" "That is where it gets interesting," Carter said, leaning back in his chair with satisfaction. "I have been keeping track, and so far we have commitments for about $300 in the betting pool. But that is just from the entry fees and the smaller bets. When the day comes and people see the competition, I think we could easily double that, maybe even triple it." $300. Catherine tried to imagine that much money all in one place. It was more than her father made in half a year of back-breaking ranch work. If they could win even half of that, it would be enough to make a real difference with the bank. "There is something else," Carter said, and something in his tone made Catherine look at him sharply. "Tom Harrison heard about the race. He is planning to enter." Catherine should have expected that. Tom's humiliation from their previous race still burned bright, and he would see this as a chance for redemption. "That is fine," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I have beaten him before. I can beat him again." "I know you can," Carter said, "but I wanted you to be prepared." He is telling anyone who will listen that he was sick during that first race, that his horse was not at full strength. He is setting himself up as the favorite. Let him talk, Catherine said. Actions speak louder than words, and when Lightning crosses that finish line first, all his excuses will mean nothing. Carter smiled at her, and Catherine felt warmth bloom in her chest. Over the past few weeks, she had come to look forward to their evening conversations more than she wanted to admit. Carter had a way of seeing the world that was different from anyone else she knew. He had been places and done things that Catherine had only read about in books, and he told stories that made her laugh and made her think. But more than that, he treated her like a partner. He asked her opinion on strategy for the race, listened when she talked about Lightning's training regimen, and never once suggested that she was in over her head or needed a man to handle things for her. It was refreshing and thrilling and a little bit terrifying, because Catherine was beginning to realize that her feelings for Carter Reynolds went well beyond simple friendship. "What will you do after the race?" Catherine asked suddenly. "You said you were drifting, looking for a place to settle down. Will you stay here or will you move on?" Carter was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the stars emerging in the darkening sky. "That depends," he said finally. "On what?" He turned to look at her, and the expression in his gray eyes made Catherine's breath catch. "On whether I have a reason to stay." The air between them seemed to thicken with possibility. Catherine wanted to say something, to acknowledge the thing that was growing between them. But before she could find the words, her father stepped out onto the porch and the moment passed. "Getting late," Henry said, glancing between his daughter and the cowboy with an expression that suggested he saw more than they might have wanted. "Big day tomorrow. Catherine, you should get some rest." Catherine nodded, suddenly awkward. "Good night, Father. Good night, Carter." She escaped into the house, her heart pounding. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she could hear the low murmur of male voices from the porch and wondered what her father and Carter were discussing. She hoped Henry was not giving Carter grief about spending so much time with his daughter. The last thing they needed right now was complications. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for training. Catherine was up before sunrise, pulling on her riding clothes and heading out to the barn where Lightning waited. The mare nickered softly when she saw Catherine, pushing her velvet nose into her rider's hand in search of treats. "Good morning, beautiful," Catherine murmured, stroking the chestnut's sleek neck. "Ready to show everyone what we can do." She was saddling Lightning when Carter appeared in the barn doorway. "Mind if I watch?" he asked. "As long as you do not distract us," Catherine replied, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened at his presence. She led Lightning out to the meadow they had been using for training runs, and Carter leaned against the fence to watch. Catherine mounted and took a moment to center herself, feeling the mare's energy and readiness beneath her. Then she gave Lightning her head, and they were flying across the grass with the wind whipping past. This was what Catherine loved most in the world, this feeling of perfect unity with her horse. Lightning's stride was smooth and powerful, eating up the ground with effortless grace. Catherine could feel every muscle working beneath her, could anticipate every shift of balance and adjust her own body accordingly. Horse and rider moved as one, and in those moments, Catherine felt like she could do anything. She brought Lightning back around to where Carter waited, flushed and breathless from the run. "What did you think?" "I think," Carter said slowly, his eyes bright with something that might have been awe, "that anyone who bets against you is a fool." "Catherine, that was incredible. I have seen a lot of riders in my time, and I have never seen anyone move with a horse the way you do." Catherine felt herself blushing at the praise. "Lightning makes it easy. She is special." "You both are," Carter said, and the way he looked at Catherine made it clear he was not just talking about her riding. They stood there for a moment, the air humming with unspoken words. Then lightning stamped impatiently, breaking the spell, and Catherine laughed. "She wants another run. This girl could go all day if I let her." "That endurance is going to be important," Carter said, forcing his attention back to practical matters. "The course we mapped out is almost 2 miles. That is a long run at racing speed, especially at this altitude." "Lightning was born at altitude," Catherine reminded him. "Her lungs are adapted to thin air in a way that horses brought up from lower elevations never will be. That gives us an advantage over some of the competition." They spent the rest of the morning working Lightning through her paces, testing her speed on different terrain and practicing the kind of hard turns that might be necessary during the race. By the time they finished, both horse and rider were sweaty and tired but satisfied. Lightning had never performed better, and Catherine felt confident that they could handle anything the race threw at them. Over the following weeks, anticipation for the race built throughout the territory. More and more riders signed up to compete, drawn by the growing prize pool and the chance to prove their horses against the legendary Lightning. Catherine started to feel the pressure of everyone's expectations weighing on her, but Carter was always there with an encouraging word or a moment of levity that helped her stay focused. They had developed a routine of riding out together in the evenings after the day's work was done, exploring the trails around the ranch and talking about everything and nothing. Catherine learned that Carter had lost his own mother when he was young, that he had 3 sisters he had not seen in years because of some falling out with his father. She told him about growing up as an only child on a struggling ranch, about her mother teaching her to ride before she could walk, about the loneliness of being different in a place where conformity was expected. "You ever wish you were normal?" Carter asked one evening as they sat on a rock outcropping overlooking the valley. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. "I used to," Catherine admitted. "When I was younger, I would watch the other girls in town with their pretty dresses and their gossip and their focus on catching husbands, and I would wonder what was wrong with me that I found all of that so boring. But then I would get on Lightning's back and ride, and I would feel alive in a way I never did trying to be what everyone expected. So no, I do not wish I was normal anymore. I like who I am, even if it makes life harder sometimes." "Good," Carter said firmly, "because normal is overrated. The world has plenty of normal people. It needs more people like you, Catherine. People who are willing to be themselves no matter what anyone else thinks." Catherine turned to look at him, studying his profile in the fading light. "You make me feel brave," she said softly. "Like I can do anything as long as you believe in me." Carter's head turned, his gray eyes finding hers. "You are brave. You were brave long before I showed up. All I did was see what was already there." "That is not true," Catherine protested. "Before you came, I was racing for pocket change and feeling like I had to apologize for being good at something. You made me see that I could use my skills to really make a difference. You gave me permission to be proud of what I can do." "Catherine," Carter said, his voice rough with emotion. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You do not need anyone's permission to be proud, but if it helps, then yes, I am proud of you. So damn proud I could burst with it." Catherine's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. Carter's face was close to hers now, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes and count the faint freckles across his nose. She knew that if she closed the distance between them, he would kiss her. She could see the want in his eyes, feel the tension in his body. But she also knew that once they crossed that line, there would be no going back. Everything would change between them, and with the race coming up with so much riding on her performance, Catherine was not sure she could handle that kind of distraction. So instead of leaning in, she pulled back slightly, breaking the moment. "We should head back," she said, hating the way her voice shook. "It is getting dark and the trail is treacherous in low light." She saw disappointment flash across Carter's face, quickly hidden. "Of course," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You are right." They rode back to the ranch in silence, and that night Catherine lay in bed staring at the ceiling and wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake. Because the truth was, she wanted Carter Reynolds with an intensity that frightened her. She wanted his kisses and his touch and his steadfast presence in her life. But she also wanted to win this race, to save her father's ranch, to prove to everyone, including herself, that she was capable of great things. Could she have both? Or would pursuing one mean sacrificing the other? The day of the race dawned hot and clear, with not a cloud in the brilliant blue Colorado sky. Catherine woke before sunrise, her stomach churning with nerves. She dressed carefully in her riding clothes, practical split skirts and a fitted jacket that would not catch the wind, and braided her long hair tightly to keep it out of her face. Down in the kitchen, her father was already up, making coffee with hands that shook slightly. "Big day," he said unnecessarily when Catherine appeared. "Yes," Catherine agreed, accepting the cup he offered and wrapping her hands around it for comfort rather than warmth. "Your mother would be proud of you," Henry said abruptly. "She always knew you were special, that you were meant for more than the ordinary life. I think she would have loved seeing you race today." Tears pricked at Catherine's eyes. Her mother had died 5 years ago, carried off by pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter, and Catherine still missed her with an ache that never fully went away. "I wish she could be here." "She is," Henry said firmly. "I believe that. And I believe she is going to be with you today, helping you fly." They rode into Anima's Forks together as the sun climbed over the mountains, and Catherine's jaw dropped when she saw the crowd that had gathered. It seemed like half the territory had turned out for the race. The main street was packed with people, miners and ranchers and townspeople all jostling for position. Makeshift betting stations had been set up, and the air buzzed with excited conversation and the exchange of money. Carter found them almost immediately, materializing out of the crowd with a grin on his face. "Are you ready for this?" he asked Catherine. "I do not think I have a choice," Catherine replied, looking at all the people. "There must be 500 people here." "More like 600, Carter said. "Word spread faster than I expected. The betting pool is over $800 now, Catherine. 800. If you win, your father's ranch will be saved with money left over. $800. Catherine felt dizzy just thinking about that much money. It was more than most people in Anima's Forks earned in 2 years, and it was all riding on her and Lightning. "Let me take Lightning and get her ready," Carter said gently. "You stay with your father and try to relax. The race does not start for another hour." Catherine handed over Lightning's reins reluctantly, watching as Carter led the mare toward the area that had been designated for the competitors. There were at least a dozen other horses there, all of them looking fast and fit and ready to race. Catherine recognized Tom Harrison's black stallion and several other animals she had seen around the territory. But there were also newcomers, horses brought in specifically for this race by riders who thought they had a chance at the prize money. Catherine Keller. She turned to find Sheriff Dalton standing beside her. The lawman looked serious but not unfriendly. "Yes, Sheriff. Just wanted to let you know that I will be watching to make sure everything stays fair," he said. "There are a lot of people here today and a lot of money at stake. That can make some folks do stupid things. You see any trouble, Any hint that someone is trying to interfere with you or your horse, you come to me immediately. Understand, Catherine nodded, grateful for his concern. Thank you, Sheriff. As the hour stretched on, Catherine found herself growing more and more nervous. She watched the other riders preparing their mounts, saw the way they assessed Lightning with calculating eyes. She heard snatches of conversation from the crowd, people discussing the odds and the various competitors. And she heard her name mentioned over and over, sometimes with admiration but more often with doubt. A woman racing against men. That is absurd. I heard she is good, but this is a different level. This is serious competition. Tom Harrison is going to eat her alive. That stallion of his is built for speed. Catherine tried to block out the voices, but they wormed their way into her head, planting seeds of doubt. What if she had been fooling herself all these months? What if she really was not as good as she thought? What if Lightning was tired or sick or just had an off day? Stop. Carter's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. He had appeared at her elbow without her noticing, and now he took her shoulders and turned her to face him. I can see you getting in your own head. Stop it. You are the best rider here, and Lightning is the fastest horse. None of that has changed just because there are more people watching. But what if I fail? Catherine whispered. What if I let everyone down? You will not, Carter said with absolute certainty. But even if you did, even if something went wrong and you lost, it would not change who you are. You would still be Catherine Keller, the woman who is brave enough to take on impossible odds. The woman who looks at obstacles and sees opportunities. The woman I have come to care about more than I have ever cared about anyone. Catherine stared at him, her heart suddenly pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the race. Carter, I know this is not the right time, he said quickly. I know you need to focus on the race. But I wanted you to hear it before you ride. Whatever happens today, Catherine, you have already changed my life. You have made me believe in settling down, in finding a place and people worth staying for. You have made me want things I never thought I would want. And if you will have me, I would like to be part of your life after today. Not just as a ranch hand working for your father, but as something more. Like what? Catherine asked, barely breathing. Like whatever you want, Carter said simply. Friend, partner, husband, if you will have me. I know we have not known each other long, but sometimes you just know. And I know that you are the woman I want to build a future with. Catherine felt tears threatening, but these were happy tears, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming emotion. I want that too, she whispered. I have been so afraid to say it, so worried about being distracted, but Carter, I have been falling for you since the first day we met. And yes, I want you in my life. I want all of it. Carter's face split into a smile so brilliant it rivaled the sun. He pulled Catherine into his arms, holding her tight against his chest, and she could feel his heart pounding as hard as hers. Then win this race, he murmured into her hair. Win it for your father, win it for yourself, but also win it so we can start the rest of our lives together. Catherine nodded against his chest, feeling stronger and more centered than she had all morning. Carter was right. She was good enough. She and Lightning were a team that could not be beaten. All she had to do was remember that and trust in their abilities. The call came to bring the horses to the starting line. Catherine mounted Lightning with Carter's help, settling into the familiar saddle with a sense of coming home. Lightning felt fresh and eager beneath her, ready to run. Catherine leaned down to whisper in the mare's ear. All right, girl. This is it. Let us show them what we can do. The race course had been laid out to take advantage of the terrain around Anima's Forks. It started on the main street, then headed out of town along the river road, before looping through a series of meadows and finally coming back to finish where it started. 2 miles of varied terrain that would test both speed and endurance. Judges had been positioned at key points along the route to watch for cheating, and Sheriff Dalton himself would be at the finish line. Catherine found herself lined up between Tom Harrison and a grizzled prospector on a rangy gray gelding. Tom gave her a sneer that was probably supposed to be intimidating but just looked petulant. "Ready to lose, Catherine?" "I never lose," Catherine replied coolly. The starter raised his pistol. The crowd fell silent, hundreds of people holding their breath. Catherine gathered lightning beneath her, feeling the mare coil like a spring. The gun fired. Lightning exploded forward with a power that nearly unseated Catherine despite her years of experience. The mare surged ahead of the pack immediately, her long legs eating up the ground. Catherine crouched low over her neck, making herself as small as possible to reduce wind resistance. Behind her, she could hear the thunder of hooves as the other riders gave chase. Tom Harrison's stallion was fast. She had to give him that, and within the first quarter-mile he had pulled up beside Lightning. The prospector's gray was there too, and a paint horse that Catherine had not noticed before. They raced down the main street of Anima's Forks with the crowd roaring on either side. Then they were out of town and onto the river road, the packed dirt flying beneath Lightning's hooves. Catherine let the mare stretch out fully, trusting her to find her own rhythm. This was where their partnership mattered most. Lightning knew what was being asked of her, knew that this race mattered in ways the others never had. The pack began to thin out as they hit the first mile. Several horses fell back, unable to maintain the brutal pace. But Tom's stallion was still there, and so was the paint. They pounded through the meadows with the sun beating down and the mountains watching overhead. Catherine's arms ached from holding Lightning steady, and her legs burned from gripping the saddle, but she did not let up for a second. Then disaster struck. As they came around a tight turn where the trail narrowed between two large boulders, the paint horse stumbled. Its rider, trying to correct, pulled hard on the reins and the paint veered sideways directly into Lightning's path. Catherine had a split second to react. If she tried to go around on the inside, Lightning might crash into the boulders. If she went outside, she would lose precious ground. So instead, she did something crazy. She urged Lightning to jump. The mare responded instantly, gathering herself and launching into the air. For one heart-stopping moment they were flying, sailing over the paint horse's hindquarters with inches to spare. Then Lightning's hooves hit the ground on the other side and they were running again, the obstacle behind them. The crowd at the finish line had heard about the jump from spectators along the route. And when Catherine and Lightning came thundering back into town with a full-length lead over Tom Harrison's stallion, the roar was deafening. Catherine could see the finish line ahead, could see Carter and her father and what looked like the entire population of Anima's Forks screaming her name. She leaned low over Lightning's neck and whispered, "Just a little more, girl. You can do it." Lightning found a last reserve of speed Catherine had not known was there. The mare accelerated, pulling away from the stallion by 2 lengths, then 3. They crossed the finish line in a blur of speed and power and perfect partnership, and the crowd exploded in celebration. Catherine pulled Lightning to a gentle stop and dismounted on shaking legs. Before she could fully process what had just happened, she was engulfed in a tide of people. Her father was there, his face wet with tears, pulling her into a bear hug that lifted her off her feet. Carter was there, his eyes shining with pride and something deeper. And then the rest of the town was there, everyone wanting to congratulate her, to touch Lightning, to be part of the moment. Sheriff Dalton had to restore order, pushing people back so the judges could make the official announcement. But there was never any doubt about the outcome. Catherine Keller had won by over 3 lengths, setting a course record in the process. The betting pool, final count $850, was awarded to the Keller family. Henry Keller stood on the porch of the general store and held up the heavy bag of money for everyone to see. His voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. "I want to thank everyone who came out today to witness something truly special. My daughter has always been an exceptional rider, but today she proved that she is more than that. She is an exceptional person. Catherine, I am so proud of you that I do not even have the words." The crowd cheered, and Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. She had done it. She had actually done it. The ranch was saved, her father's dreams preserved, and she had proven to everyone, including herself, that she was capable of anything. But when she looked around for Carter, he was not with the crowd. She found him standing with Lightning, checking the mare over with gentle hands to make sure she had not been injured during the race. Catherine made her way through the press of people to join him. "She is all right?" Catherine asked anxiously. "She is perfect," Carter said, straightening up with a smile. "Tired, but that is to be expected. That was one hell of a race, Catherine, and that jump, I have never seen anything like it." "I did not really think about it," Catherine admitted. "I just knew we had to get past that paint horse, and jumping was the only option that made sense." Carter shook his head in amazement. "Most riders would have pulled up or crashed, but not you. You trusted your horse and you trusted yourself, and you made the impossible look easy." Catherine moved closer to him, suddenly aware that they were having this conversation in the middle of a crowd of hundreds. "Can we go somewhere more private? I want to talk to you." Carter nodded and took Lightning's reins. Together they led the mare away from the celebration, walking toward the quieter end of town where the buildings gave way to open meadow. When they were finally alone, Catherine turned to face Carter. "You said before the race that you wanted to be part of my life," she said, her heart pounding. "Did you mean that?" "Every word," Carter said seriously. "Catherine, I know we have only known each other a few weeks. I know that is not very long to make life-changing decisions. But I have been all over the West, and I have never met anyone like you. You are strong and brave and talented and kind. You challenge me to be better. When I am with you, I feel like I have finally found the place I am supposed to be." "I feel the same way," Catherine whispered. "It is crazy, is it not? We should not feel this much this fast." "But I cannot help it, Carter. I look at you and I see my future. I see the life I want to build, the partner I want beside me. I see home." Carter closed the distance between them and cupped her face in his hands. "Can I kiss you now, please?" Catherine breathed. His lips met hers in a kiss that was everything she had imagined and more. It was gentle and fierce all at once, full of promise and passion and perfect rightness. Catherine melted into him, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck as she kissed him back with everything she had. Lightning, standing nearby, snorted softly as if in approval. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Carter rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is too soon, and I know we should probably wait and do things properly, but Catherine, I do not want to wait. I want to start our life together right now. Say yes." Catherine laughed, pure joy bubbling up inside her. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. I will marry you, Carter Reynolds." They kissed again, and this time there was nothing uncertain about it. This was the kiss of two people who had found each other against all odds and were not letting go. When they finally made their way back to the celebration, hand in hand and grinning like fools, everyone saw immediately what had happened. Henry Keller looked at his daughter and her cowboy and smiled. "I suppose I should be upset that you are getting married after knowing each other less than a month," he said. "But I saw the way you two look at each other. That is how I looked at your mother, Catherine. When you know, you know." "Welcome to the family, Carter." The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church in Animas Forks. It was a simple ceremony, but the whole town turned out to witness it. Catherine wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved all these years, and Carter wore his best suit with his dark hair slicked back and his gray eyes shining with happiness. They exchanged vows in front of God and the community, promising to love and honor each other for all the days of their lives. And when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Carter kissed his bride with such tenderness that half the women in attendance found themselves wiping away tears. The reception was held at the Keller ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food and drink enough to feed an army. Catherine danced with her father, with Sheriff Dalton, with half the men in town. But mostly she danced with Carter, held close in his arms as they swayed to the music and dreamed about their future. "What do you want?" Carter asked as they danced under the stars. "For our life together, I mean. What do you hope for?" Catherine thought about it. "I want to keep racing," she said. "Not for money necessarily, though that was exciting, but because I love it, because it makes me feel alive. And I want to help run the ranch with you and my father. I want to raise horses and cattle and maybe someday children. I want a life full of purpose and passion. What do you want?" "I want exactly what you just described," Carter said, pulling her closer. "I want to build something lasting with you. I want to be your partner in all things, the way we were partners in setting up that race. I want to wake up every morning next to you and know that I am exactly where I am meant to be. And yes, someday I would very much like to have children with you. Not right away, we should have some time just for us first, but eventually." "Eventually," Catherine agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Carter, yes, thank you for seeing me, for believing in me when I had stopped believing in myself, for giving me the chance to prove what I could do." "You did not need me for that," Carter said softly. "You have always had that fire inside you, that determination. All I did was provide an opportunity for you to let it shine." "Then thank you for that," Catherine said, "and thank you for loving me." "That," Carter said, "is the easiest thing I have ever done." As the months passed, Catherine and Carter settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked side by side on the ranch, making improvements and building the herd back up now that the debt was paid. Carter proved to be as good with cattle as he had claimed, and his ideas for more efficient ranching methods helped increase their productivity. Catherine continued to train and race Lightning, though now she did it purely for the joy of it rather than out of financial necessity. The following spring, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Carter over breakfast one morning, watching his face cycle through surprise and then overwhelming joy. He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "We are having a baby," he said wonderingly. "Catherine, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, even though she could see the answer written all over his face. "I am beyond happy," Carter said. "I am blessed. You have given me everything, Catherine, a home, a purpose, a family. I love you so much." The pregnancy was not easy. The altitude made Catherine tired more quickly than normal, and there were days when she could barely get out of bed. But Carter was there through all of it, patient and supportive and endlessly caring. He took over most of her ranch duties without complaint, insisting that she rest and take care of herself and their growing child. Their son was born in October of 1883, during the first snow of the season. The labor was long and difficult, but when Catherine finally held her baby in her arms, she forgot all the pain. He was perfect, with a dusting of dark hair like his father and blue eyes like his mother. "What should we name him?" Carter asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and gazing at his son with awe. "I was thinking James," Catherine said. "James Henry Reynolds, after both our fathers." "James," Carter repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, James. Welcome to the world, little man." Henry Keller was besotted with his grandson from the first moment. He spent hours with the baby, telling him stories about the ranch and his grandmother and all the adventures that awaited him when he was older. Watching her father with her son, Catherine felt a completeness she had never experienced before. Lightning, too, seemed to understand that things had changed. The mare was gentle around the baby, lowering her head so James could pet her soft nose when Catherine brought him out to the barn. "You are going to teach him to ride," Catherine told Lightning. "Just like you taught me what it means to have a true partner." As James grew from an infant to a toddler, Catherine and Carter had many discussions about their future. The ranch was doing well, better than it had in years, and they had money saved for the first time in Catherine's memory. They talked about expanding their operations, maybe buying some of the adjacent land that had recently become available. They talked about having more children, giving James siblings to grow up with. They talked about growing old together on this land they both loved. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when James was asleep and the ranch was peaceful, Catherine and Carter would ride out together on Lightning and Carter's buckskin. They would watch the sun set over the mountains and remember that crazy race that had brought them together, the gamble that had paid off in ways neither of them could have imagined. "You ever regret it?" Catherine asked one evening. "Staying here, settling down. You talked about how you had been drifting your whole life. Do you ever miss that freedom?" "Not even for a second," Carter said firmly. "Catherine, I spent years wandering because I did not know what I was looking for. And then I found you, and I realized that what I had been searching for all along was a place to belong. You and James and this ranch, this life we have built together, this is everything I ever wanted. I am home." Catherine leaned over to kiss him, her heart full. "I love you, Carter Reynolds." "I love you too, Catherine Reynolds, always and forever." When James was 2 years old, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She continued to work on the ranch right up until the last few weeks, and Carter learned to accept that his wife was not the type to sit idle just because she was expecting. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1886, a tiny thing with blonde hair and her father's gray eyes. They named her Abigail Rose, and if possible, she was even more beloved than James had been. James took his role as big brother very seriously, always wanting to help care for his sister and protect her from any perceived threats. As the children grew, Catherine made sure to teach them both to ride. She put James on a pony when he was 3 and Abigail when she was 2, starting them the same way her mother had started her. But she also made sure they understood that riding was about partnership, not domination. A horse was not a tool to be used but a friend to be respected. Lightning lived to the remarkable age of 28, long enough to teach both of Catherine's children the basics of horsemanship. When the beloved mare finally passed peacefully in her sleep one winter night, the whole family mourned. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a marker that read Lightning, fastest mare in the San Juan's beloved friend. Catherine cried for days, mourning not just the loss of her horse but the end of an era. Lightning had been there for all the most important moments of her life, from her early races against the local cowboys to that dramatic win that had saved the ranch. The mare had been her partner, her confidant, her link to the past, but life moved forward as it always does. James grew into a strong young man with his father's steady nature and his mother's determination. Abigail turned out to be an even more talented rider than Catherine had been, fearless and quick, and absolutely devoted to the horses in their care. The ranch continued to prosper, growing into one of the most successful operations in the San Juan Mountains. Carter and Catherine grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. There were challenges, of course. Harsh winters that killed cattle, disease that swept through the herd, accidents that required Catherine to use all her nursing skills. But they faced everything together, partners in every sense of the word. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Carter gave Catherine a gift that made her cry. It was a painting, commissioned from an artist in Denver, depicting a chestnut mare and her rider crossing a finish line while a crowd cheered. The painting captured that moment of triumph perfectly, lightning in full stride and Catherine leaning low over her neck, both of them flying. "So you never forget," Carter said, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind as she stared at the painting. "The day you proved to everyone what I already knew, that you are extraordinary." "We are extraordinary," Catherine corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "You and me together. That is what makes us strong." They kissed, and even after 20 years of marriage, Catherine still felt that same spark, that same sense of rightness she had experienced the first time Carter had held her. Some things, she thought, only got better with time. Henry Keller lived to see his grandchildren grow into adults. He passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, surrounded by family, knowing that the ranch he had built from nothing would continue for generations. His funeral was attended by half the territory, testament to the respect he had earned over his lifetime. James took over primary management of the ranch, proving to be just as capable as his grandfather and parents. Abigail, meanwhile, discovered a talent for breeding and training horses. She built up a reputation throughout Colorado for producing horses that combined speed, intelligence, and reliability, and people came from hundreds of miles away to buy her stock. As Catherine entered her 50s and then her 60s, she found herself reflecting more and more on the strange path her life had taken. If someone had told her as a young woman that she would end up saving her family's ranch through her riding skills, that she would find true love with a drifting cowboy, that she would build a life full of purpose and joy, she might not have believed them. But here she was, living proof that sometimes the most impossible dreams could come true. She still rode every day, though now on horses bred from Lightning's lineage rather than the mare herself. She had lost some of the raw speed of youth, but she made up for it with experience and skill. And every time she climbed into the saddle, she felt her mother's presence and Lightning's spirit, and the love of everyone who had believed in her. Carter was there beside her through it all, aging with grace and good humor. His dark hair turned silver, and his face became lined with the marks of a life well lived. But his gray eyes still lit up when he looked at Catherine, and his love still wrapped around her like a warm blanket on a cold night. They celebrated their 30th anniversary with a party attended by children, grandchildren, neighbors, and friends. James gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about his parents' enduring love and the example they had set for how a marriage should work. Abigail presented them with a beautiful photo album she had put together, filled with pictures documenting their life together. As Catherine paged through the album that night, sitting close to Carter on the porch swing they had shared for so many years, she marveled at everything they had experienced. There were pictures of their wedding, of them working on the ranch, of their children at various ages, of holidays and celebrations and ordinary moments that had become precious with time. "No regrets?" Carter asked softly. "Not a single one," Catherine said. "You, Carter?" "Only that I did not find you sooner," he said, kissing the top of her head. "But I suppose everything happened exactly when it was supposed to. We found each other when we were both ready, and we built something beautiful." "We did," Catherine agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. We really did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains they both loved. The air was full of the sounds of evening, cattle lowing in the distance, birds settling in for the night, the gentle rush of wind through the pines. Catherine thought about that long-ago day when a stranger had appeared in Anima's Forks and changed everything, when she had taken a gamble on a crazy race, and won not just money but a whole future. She thought about Lightning and her father, and all the people who had believed in her when it would have been easier to dismiss her. She thought about the courage it had taken to step up to that starting line, knowing that failure would mean losing everything, but trusting in herself and her horse enough to try anyway. Most of all, she thought about the man beside her, the cowboy who had seen her true worth and helped her see it too. Carter had bet on her that day, put his faith and effort into making her dream possible, and they had won everything back together. Not just money, but a life full of love and meaning. "Thank you," Catherine said suddenly. "For what?" Carter asked. "For everything," Catherine said simply. "For seeing me, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me, for being my partner in all things. I could not have asked for a better husband, a better father for my children, a better friend. The feeling," Carter said, his voice thick with emotion, "is entirely mutual. You are my heart, Carter Reynolds. You always have been. From the moment I saw you cross that finish line all those years ago. You took my breath away then, and you still do now." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something lasting. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing, carrying on the legacy that Catherine and Carter had created. Outside, the ranch stretched away in all directions, prosperous and peaceful, a testament to hard work and determination and love. The story that had begun with a race, with a gamble and a cowboy's faith, had grown into something far richer and more meaningful. Catherine had proven that she could outrace any man on a horse, and Carter had bet on her and won everything back. But what they had really won was each other, and that prize had turned out to be worth more than all the money in the world. Years continued to pass in the way they do, marked by seasons and celebrations and the steady rhythm of ranch life. Catherine and Carter grew old together with grace, their love only deepening as time went on. They became great-grandparents, watching with joy as their family tree grew and flourished. When Catherine was 72, the same age her father had been when he passed, she and Carter took a ride out to Lightning's grave. It was a beautiful summer day, much like the day of that famous race, and the mountains stood eternal and majestic against the brilliant blue sky. "Do you remember how scared I was?" Catherine asked as they stood looking at the marker. "I tried not to show it, but inside I was terrified that I would fail, that I would let everyone down." "I never doubted you for a second," Carter said, taking her hand. "I saw your skill, your determination, your heart. I knew you would win." "You gave me the courage to try," Catherine said. "That was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me, not the money from the race, though that saved the ranch, but the belief that I could do something extraordinary if I was brave enough to attempt it." She turned to face her husband, this man who had walked beside her for 5 decades, through joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. His face was deeply lined now, his silver hair thin, but when he smiled at her, she still saw the young cowboy who had appeared in Anima's Forks and changed her life. "I love you, Carter Reynolds," she said. "I have loved you every day since I met you, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you, Catherine Reynolds," he said, pulling her close. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, the answer to prayers I did not know I was praying. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me. for being mine." They stood together on that hilltop, two people who had taken a chance on each other and found everything they had been searching for. Below them, the ranch spread out in prosperous beauty, home to children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who would carry on their legacy. Above them, the Colorado sky stretched endless and blue, full of possibility. Catherine thought about that young woman she had been, so fierce and determined, but also uncertain of her place in the world. She thought about the risks they had taken, the gamble that had paid off in ways they never could have imagined. She thought about Lightning and that moment of perfect unity as they crossed the finish line, proving to everyone that a woman could be just as good as any man. But mostly she thought about love, about partnership, about finding someone who saw you truly and loved you anyway. Carter had seen her fire and her fear, her strength and her vulnerability, and he had chosen to stay. Together they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of courage and determination and love that would echo through generations. As the sun began to set, painting the world in shades of gold and amber, Catherine and Carter made their way back down the hill to where their horses waited patiently. They rode home together in comfortable silence, hand in hand, partners in all things just as they had always been. And in that moment, Catherine knew with absolute certainty that every choice she had made, every risk she had taken, had led her exactly where she was meant to be, home. With the man she loved, in the place she loved, surrounded by the family they had created together. She had outrun every challenge, jumped every obstacle and crossed every finish line with Carter beside her, believing in her, loving her, making everything possible. It was, Catherine thought as they rode into the ranch yard with the lights of home glowing warm in the gathering dusk, the most perfect ending to a story that had begun with a race, and a gamble, and a cowboy, who had seen something special in a woman and her horse. They had won everything that mattered, not through luck but through partnership and trust and love that refused to quit. And as Catherine dismounted and walked hand in hand with Carter into the house where their family waited, she smiled, knowing that this was not really an ending at all. It was just another chapter in a love story that would continue through the generations, passed down in tales told by firelight about the woman who could outrace any man on a horse, and the cowboy who bet on her, and won everything back, including his own heart. The legacy they had built together would endure in the children who carried their names and their values, in the ranch that flourished under their family's care, in the stories that would be told and retold about courage and determination, and love that conquered all obstacles. Catherine and Carter Reynolds had lived a life worth living, full of adventure and passion and meaning, and they had done it together, partners from that first moment to this last perfect evening. As they sat down to dinner surrounded by their family, Catherine caught Carter's eye across the table and saw her own contentment reflected back at her. They had taken a chance on each other, and it had turned into the greatest adventure of their lives. And if they could go back and do it all over again, Catherine knew without a doubt that they would make exactly the same choices, take exactly the same risks, because the reward had been worth more than anything they could have imagined. They had won everything that mattered, and they had won it together. And that, Catherine thought as she squeezed Carter's hand beneath the table and listened to their grandchildren's laughter filling the house, was the best ending any love story could have.